Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. Alright, today we are going to be covering 1 King chapter 3, and this is the story that we were told from when we were young. This is the story about Solomon asking for wisdom. Anyway, let's read. I'm going to be reading from the NLT version, then I'm going to share my lessons from what I think we can learn from this chapter. Alright, let's do this. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and married one of his daughters. He brought her to live in the city of David until he could finish building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around the city. All right, let's just pause there. So first, one of the things that Solomon ended up doing is that he ended up having so many wives. Yani, you think David had many wives and concubines. Solomon ended up having extremely many wives. And the reason why that ended up happening is that he wanted to make alliances with different nations and different kings. So he ended up marrying their daughters. So the first one that we see happening here is that he made an alliance with Pharaoh. If you guys remember Pharaoh means the king of Egypt. If you guys remember Egypt, this is exactly where the guys had come from. They had been made slaves in that land, in that nation, and then that is where God rescued them. But what did Solomon do? Ameenda akafanya alliance na hao, and then he has gone and brought the daughter of the king to his household to become his wife. What does that mean? Of course, first, these two nations don't worship the same God, they worship different gods. So that is how Solomon ended up worshiping different gods. That's how Solomon ended up raising altars for different gods, because he married so many different wives, and every wife came with a different way of worshiping. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there so that we know exactly what it meant for Solomon to marry many wives and how that came about. All right, so he says, verse 2, at that time, the people of Israel sacrificed their offerings at local places of worship. For temple honoring the name of the Lord had not yet been built. So we've seen that Solomon is doing major constructions, he's carrying out major constructions, he's building his palace, he's building God's temple, and he's yet to build the wall around the city. So at this point, people were worshipping from different places because the temple had not yet been built. Verse 3, it says, Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifice and burnt incense at local places of worship. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon. So the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. That night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied, "You showed great and faithful love to your servant, my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you have continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. In short, I am young and clueless." And here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well. I know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon has asked for wisdom. So God replied, "Because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice and have not asked for a long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has had or ever will have." So Solomon was the wisest man, and still is the wisest man that ever lived, because the Bible says that he was given an understanding heart that no one has ever had and ever will have. "And I will also give you what you did not ask for. I'll give you riches and fame. No other king in the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my decrees and my commands as your father David did, I will give you long life. All right, let's first pause there. So first, Solomon loved God. It is said that Solomon loved God, and then it continues to show us how he loved God. That loving God for him wasn't just like Solomon loved God, full stop. It says that Solomon loved God and followed all the decrees of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifice and burnt offering and incense at local places of worship. Loving God means following his decrees. The other thing that happens is that Solomon asks for wisdom because he feels young and clueless. And God over delivers because God says, I'm going to give you wisdom, I'm going to give you riches, and I'm going to give you fame. And then also on top of that, if you obey me, I'm also going to give you long life. Then how great is that? But I hope that you notice that in all the things that God gave, the one that had caveat, like it needed for him to obey, was a long life. All right, verse 15 says, Then Solomon woke up and realized that it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, where he sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then he invited all his officials to a great banquet. Sometimes later, 2 prostitutes came to the king to have an argument settled. Please, my lord, one of them began, This woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a baby while she was with me in the house. 3 days later, this woman also had a baby. We were alone, and there were only 2 of us in the house. But her baby died during the night when she rolled over on it. Then she got up in the night and took my son from beside me while I was asleep, and she laid her dead child in my arms and took mine to sleep beside hers. And in the morning when I tried to nurse my son, he was dead. But when I looked more closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't my son at all. Then the other woman interrupted, It certainly was your son, and the living child is mine. No, the first woman said, the living child is mine, and the dead one is yours. So they argued back and forth before the king. Then the king said, let's get the facts straight. Both of you claim that the living child is yours, and each one says that the dead one belongs to the other. All right, bring me a sword. So as the sword was brought to the king, then he said, cut the living child in 2 and give half to one woman and half to the other. Then the woman who was the real mother of the living child and who loved him very much cried out, Oh no, my lord, give her the child. Please don't kill him. But the other woman said, All right, he will be neither yours nor mine. Divide him between us. Then the king said, Do not kill the child, but give him to the woman who wants to live, for she is the mother. When all Israel heard the king's decision, the people were in awe of the king, for they saw the wisdom God had given for rendering justice. Oh my goodness. First, I like the fact that God shows proof that it wasn't just a dream, that Solomon wasn't just in a dream when he thought that he had prayed for wisdom and was given wisdom, that he actually prayed for wisdom and God literally answered him. So that is basically the end of chapter 3. What are the lessons that I have learned from this? Is first that having a relationship with God doesn't just happen. We have a part to play. Loving God is shown by, number 1, following his decrees, his word and his will. And then it doesn't stop there. There's also the part of giving to God, offering sacrifices. But for most of us, that is where we draw the line. Mimi nipeane vitu draw the line. But when it talks about loving God, it says that Solomon loved God. It says that he followed his decrees, he follows his law and his word, and he offers sacrifice. So loving God is not just saying, I follow his decree. But if you're following his decrees, then you should know that offering sacrifices and making, giving and sometimes sowing seeds, sometimes all those things are also part of his decrees. So don't draw the line and say, Apandomina fika in this loving God. Because if you're really following his decrees, then of course you're giving. Then of course you're giving sacrifices. There's sacrifices that you are making in just the fact that you're loving God. The other thing that I find so comforting is that it is okay to feel young and to feel clueless, especially clueless. It's okay to feel clueless in a new position. Maybe you've just been promoted, or you have been asked to lead a project, or your parents died and now you have to rise up and pick up their roles. Maybe you're a new mom or a new wife, or like me, you're in a very new business that is full of men and you're clueless. Honestly, you have no idea what you're doing. Most of the time, you're just like a duck that is just like, stepping on water like here and there. Like, you honestly don't know what you're doing. It is okay to be clueless. As a matter of fact, God makes a space for people that are clueless in James chapter 1, verse 5-8. And it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, if anyone feels clueless, if anyone feels like, Akimimi sijui what I'm doing, I have no idea what I'm doing, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God. And the same God that gives to all men freely will not rebuke you for asking. Just make sure that you're asking without a doubt. God says he will give us wisdom when we ask for it. When you feel clueless, or feel like, oh my goodness. Sometimes I listen to people who like do the stuff like maybe therapy and stuff, and I'm just like, how do you even handle such a case? Yani, when you feel clueless, remember that the Lord promised to give us wisdom without finding fault, without rebuking us, and He's going to give it freely. All you need to do is to ask, and ask without doubting that He will do it. And like we have seen in this chapter, that He delivers. As a matter of fact, God always over delivers, because He's in the process. He's in the business of doing much more than we can think or even imagine. He's in the business of doing abundantly much more than we can even think or even pray and ask for. So if you're feeling clueless, please ask for wisdom, because God will give it to you freely without rebuking you, and abundantly. This is your girl Wakeji Kamore, and this has been Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. See you tomorrow.